Today is Monday, July 13th, 2026, and today is National Beans and Franks Day, which sounds like someone looked at the pantry, decided grocery shopping could wait another day, and accidentally invented a holiday. But after digging through today's stories, I noticed they all had something in common. None of them set out to become legends. One explorer was simply trying to answer a geographical question. One sign was built to sell real estate. And one power outage became part of New York City's identity. Sometimes history isn't created on purpose. Sometimes ordinary moments simply refuse to be forgotten. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who apparently spends an unhealthy amount of time wandering through historical rabbit holes so you don't have to. On July 13, 1832, American explorer Henry Schoolcraft reached what he identified as the source of the Mississippi River. Today, if you wanted to find the beginning of America's longest river system, you could simply pull out your phone, open a map, and have your answer in seconds. In the early 1800s, it wasn't nearly that simple. Large portions of the upper Midwest remained only partially mapped by European Americans. Explorers relied on canoes, compasses, hand-drawn maps, and the knowledge of Native American guides who had traveled these waterways for generations. Schoolcraft's expedition eventually arrived at a lake in what is now northern Minnesota. He named it Lake Itasca. The name itself was created by combining parts of the Latin words veritas caput, meaning true head, in other words, the true source. Now, geographers have continued to debate exactly what should count as the Mississippi's most distant source. Depending on how you define it, there are streams that begin even farther away. But Schoolcraft's expedition finally gave the country a practical answer to a question people had wondered about for generations. I've always found that fascinating. The Mississippi River carries water more than 2,300 miles to the Gulf of Mexico. But every one of those miles begins with something surprisingly small. And our next story is another reminder that some of the biggest landmarks in history began with remarkably ordinary intentions. On July 13, 1923, a massive new sign overlooking Los Angeles was officially dedicated. It didn't say Hollywood. It said Hollywoodland. And it wasn't built to celebrate the movie industry. It was an advertisement. Developers were promoting a new housing subdivision in the hills above Los Angeles. The giant letters were never intended to become famous. In fact, they were only expected to remain standing for about 18 months. That's it. Temporary advertising. But something unexpected happened. As Hollywood's film industry exploded in popularity, the sign slowly became associated with something much bigger than real estate. It became a symbol of dreams, success, fame, and the entertainment industry itself. Eventually, the land was removed and the sign was restored, and generations of visitors began making the hike just to see it up close. It's funny to think that one of the world's most recognizable landmarks began as what was essentially a really large billboard. Sometimes history has an incredible return on investment. And then we moved to 1977, where on July 13th, lightning struck transmission lines north of New York City. One problem led to another. Protective systems failed. Power plants shut down. And within a matter of minutes, America's largest city was in the dark. Today, that would be unsettling. In 1977, it was something else entirely. There were no smartphones, no GPS, no internet. No battery-powered laptops keeping people connected. Traffic lights went dark. Subways stopped where they were. Elevators trapped passengers. Air conditioners fell silent during one of the hottest summers on record. More than 8 million people suddenly had to figure things out the old-fashioned way, by talking to one another. The blackout also became associated with widespread looting and arson in parts of the city. Many neighborhoods were hit hard. Others came together to help neighbors, direct traffic, and check on the elderly. Both stories are part of what happened that night. One thing I've always found fascinating about major blackouts is how quickly they reveal the invisible systems we depend on every day. You don't think much about electricity until it isn't there. Then suddenly you realize how much of modern life is quietly powered by something you almost never notice. And while looking back across today's stories, I noticed that they all began with something surprisingly ordinary. An expedition, a billboard, a lightning strike. None of them were intended to become part of American history, but they did. That brings us to someone whose career almost never happened at all. Born on July 13, 1942, Harrison Ford is one of those actors who seems like he was destined to become a movie star. The funny thing is, it didn't happen that way. Early in his career, acting jobs were hard to come by. To support his growing family, Ford worked as a carpenter. In fact, one of those carpentry jobs brought him to the offices of director George Lucas. Lucas already knew Ford from the film American Graffiti, but while casting a little movie called Star Wars, he asked Ford to help read lines with other actors during auditions. Ford wasn't even there to audition. He was there to help. The more Lucas heard him read those scenes, the more he realized he might have already found Han Solo. The rest, as they say, is history. From Han Solo, to Indiana Jones, to Rick Deckard, to President James Marshall and Air Force One, Ford has spent decades creating characters that audiences instantly recognize. I've always liked that his biggest break came while he was doing honest work to pay the bills. Sometimes, opportunity shows up while you're busy building something else. Looking back across today's stories, I kept thinking about unexpected beginnings. The source of America's greatest river starts as a quiet stream in northern Minnesota. The world's most famous sign begins life as a temporary real estate advertisement. A lightning storm creates a night New York City would never forget. And Harrison Ford's path to becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars ran through a carpenter's toolbox. History has a way of reminding us that remarkable things don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they start so quietly that nobody realizes they're witnessing the beginning of a legend. Anyway, that's what I found while exploring July 13th. And before I go, here's today's oddly appropriate quote. "The future depends on what you do today." Mahatma Gandhi. If you'd like to hear more of my narration work, podcasts, or other projects, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and thanks for taking a weird little walk through history with me. I'll see you tomorrow.